So I've had a few requests to run through building a Skype for Business server or environment, so I thought we'd do a couple of blog articles about that. So in this one we're going to be building a standard edition Skype for Business server. So I'll take you through from start to finish. So I've prepared a lot of the environment already, so if we just have a look and I'll show you what we actually have. I've got Active Directory built already, so I've got a domain called contoso.local, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. I've got a domain controller in there. There we go, DC SQL. There's also SQL on it at the moment, but we won't be using that in this video, but I'll possibly be using it later in my lab. So I've also got a certificate authority installed on that domain controller as well. So if we have a quick look at it, there it is. We've also got the certificate authority installed, which is there. So we're pretty much ready to go. So I've prepared a server already, which is this one, and this is going to be our Skype for Business Standard Edition server. So you'll see that I've made it a member of the domain. There we go, stdfe, and we can have a quick look at the specification as well. So what I tend to do for my labs is I tend to, during the actual build of the server, allocate more resources. So this currently has 8 virtual processors enabled and 8 gig of RAM. But then typically what I'll do is once I've built it, I'll actually wind back the number of cores and the amount of RAM in there as well. So let's go through the process of actually building this environment. So we need to do everything from preparing the Active Directory, doing all our DNS setup, and of course installing Skype for Business topology and all that sort of good stuff. So let's actually kick off the install and we'll see what comes first. To start with then, what we're going to do is install all the relevant roles and features to support the standard edition of Skype for Business. Now, if you look on the blog, you'll see that I've broken down what they are. You can also install them from a PowerShell command. I've copied that into Notepad here, but you can also pick that up on the blog article. You'll see here that I've put my source to my DVD drive, so if we have a quick look, we should see that I've got the Windows Server 2012 R2 media in there. So what we're going to do is just select that, and I'm going to launch PowerShell. Now make sure you launch PowerShell as an administrator, because if you don't, these features won't install. So what I'm going to do is just paste that command line in there, and we'll let these roles install. It shouldn't take too long. And there we go, that's all done. It didn't take too long. So you'll see there that it says I have to restart the server because we've put some roles on there that need a reboot. So let's reboot the server and we'll come back to this and start looking at the Skype for Business element. Right, so we've rebooted the server, all the features are installed. So what we're going to do now is actually dive into the Skype for Business installer and get the process going. So the first thing we're going to do is actually run the Active Directory preparation. So I've already got the DVD in this machine, it's there, so let's fire it up. Okay, I'm not going to connect to the internet for updates, I'm just going to do it direct from this DVD. And there we go, we're at the main installer. So the first thing I'm going to do is install the administrative tools. So you'll see that on the right hand side there. So let's install that. There we go, that didn't take very long. So the next step we're going to do is prepare the Active Directory. So what this does is it extends the schema for Skype for Business and also sets up a number of security groups that are used by the platform. So let's jump into that option there, prepare the Active Directory. And you'll see that the first one we have is prepare schema, and that you only have to run that once because there's one schema per forest. So let's run that. Now bear in mind you do need remote registry enabled on your domain controller, the one that holds your schema master. My DC in this is a 2012 R2, so that's enabled currently. There we go, that's finished. That didn't take particularly long. So what we're going to do now is prepare the current forest. So let's run that option there. We're going to go with the local domain, So just let that run. And there we go. So what we're going to do now is the next one on the list, which is prepare the current domain. It's very quick, that one. And the final one we need to do is add users to the CS administrator group. So what we'll do is we'll jump into directory services, so Active Directory users and computers. I'm going to find CS administrator group. There we go. And I'm going to add my administrator user to it. Ooh, or I'm going to do something completely different. There we go. So we've made administrator a member of that group. And there we go. Great, so Active Directory is done, so let's jump back to the main menu. So what we're going to do now is run the option to prepare the first standard edition server. So this server, as it's the first one and it's the first standard edition unit, it's going to host the CMS. So let's get that one run. It's that one there, prepare the first standard edition server. So click on that and we're going to let that run. It can take a little while, this component. And there we go, that didn't take too long. So the next step, we're going to fire up the topology tool and actually define our Skype for Business topology. So I'm just going to minimize or get the installer out of the way for now. Pop on your start menu, you should be able to find the Skype for Business server topology builder. We're going to define a new topology because this is a new installation. And it's going to take us through the wizard. So firstly we just need to give it somewhere to store the topology. So I'm just going to save it on the desktop. So we need to enter our primary SIP domain. So I'm going to use contoso.com. I'm not going to add any additional supported domains, but if you wanted to add to contoso.co.uk, for example, you could do it here. So this is just the company name for the site, or for the first site anyway. Okay, and now what we're going to do is enter the front end wizard. And this is where we define the properties of the first front end pool that we're going to implement, which is this one. So it's a standard edition, so we need to make sure that's selected, and we need to enter the DNS name for the standard edition server that we're going to be deploying. So that's the name of the server, stdfe.contoso.local. And I'm going to add in conferencing. I'm not going to add in PSTN. I'm going to add in fact, I'm just going to leave it at conferencing for now. We'll cover the other elements later. I'm not going to install the mediation server because I'm not including telephony in this particular lab. And I'm not going to do the edge pool as yet. I'll cover that in a different article. We don't need SQL because it's going to be a standard edition server, so it uses the local copy of SQL. And we need to define a file store. So it's pretty easy to do. We pop into our C drive or wherever you want to put it. I'm going to call it Skype for Business Store, and I'm going to share it. We'll sort out the permissions later, but I'm just going to give everyone full control for now. So it's on our server, and we're going to call it S4B Store. Now this is the external web services, so I'm just going to change that to web. We'll look at that later. And I'm not going to be putting in an Office Web Apps server at this point. There we go, that's our topology defined. Now at this point what you can do is go and publish the topology. Right click, publish topology. It doesn't take too long. It's asking us which server is going to have the central management store. Well, we've only got one server in our topology so far, and that's this one. So let's select the default and we'll let this run. There we go. So that's finished. So I'm just going to minimize the topology. We're going to pop back into the installer. And what we need to do now is install or update the Skype for Business server system. So what this does is it goes off, looks at the topology, and installs the right roles for this particular server. So let's go into there. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is install the local configuration store. Now that's just essentially the local copy of information that it needs from the CMS. So let's click on that. We're going to retrieve directly from the central management store. There we go, that didn't take too long. So what we're going to do now is just run the next piece, which is set up or remove Skype for Business server components. So this is going to pick up the required roles and functions from the central management store, from the local configuration store actually, and install those particular elements. So let's run that. This piece can take a little while to run actually, so let's just leave it. I might speed it up a little bit. Okay, so that took a little while to run, but it's now finished, so click on finish. So the next thing we need to do is actually get a certificate installed on the front end server. It's relatively straightforward. Hit run. Okay, and the first one we're going to choose is the default certificate, and that's going to be for your server and the web services as well. So make sure that all the roles are selected and hit request. There's the UK. I'm going to select it for all of my domains. I've got contoso.com and contoso.co.uk in there. It'll also add in all the required extra domains that we need in there, or extra SANs. There we go. And that's now requested the certificate. If you want, you can have a look. That shows you the certificate. It's issued to the server name. If you look in the details, you should be able to see the subject alternative names in there. There we go. So what we're going to do now is it will just assign that certificate that we've just created. And that's done. So now let's sort the authenticating token. So we're going to select that one. Again, just hit request, fill some basic details in. There we go. That's finished. So now we need to assign that one as well. So that's done. So we're now at the point that we can actually start the services. Now we can start the services, but there are still a few other things we need to do before we can get people logged in. So let's go through the start the services element. So I'm going to fire up the Skype for Business control panel, or the management shell. There we go. And you can see there, it tells you the command you can use to actually start the pool. If you want to, you can fire up the services console here, services.msc, and in here you should see the services starting up. There you go. So you'll see that the front end sometimes can take a little while to start. There you go, you can see all the services are running. Now, before we can do anything with, there's a few things we need to do. We haven't configured any of the DNS settings. And of course we need to configure some users. So let's have a look at the DNS admin, and then we can work out what we need to put in there. So here we are in the DNS admin tool. So let's have a look in the forward lookup zones. Now the first thing to realize is we're using contoso.com for our login domain, so we need to create a zone for that. There we go. So there's some A records we need to define. First one is going to be the SIP, which is going to go to my server, which I can't remember the IP address of it, so let me just have a quick look. 0.101. We're going to create the dial-in address. And the meet. Also, we need to do the link discover internal. And we also need to create the legacy SRV records as well. So on our contoso.com we do new, other, SRV, it's SIP internal TLS, port is 5061 and sip.contoso.com. Now we also enable contoso.co.uk, so I'm also going to set up a zone for that. And we need to create the same records as well. Oops, I got the IP address wrong for that one, so I'll just update it. And we need to create the same SRV record as well. There we go. So theoretically now, let's have a look, see if we can fire up the Skype for Business control panel. And there we go, we're straight into the control panel. So I'm going to configure some users, but of course I need some users actually in Active Directory to do this. So I'm just going to pop into Active Directory users and computers. I've got a users OU, so I'm just going to create a user in there. There we go. I'm going to give him some basic information like an email address. I'm also going to give him a phone number as well. That will do. So back in our control panel we're going to enable a user. So you'll see there we've got the option to enable a user. So let's hit that. We need to select our user. So I'm going to find Derek. There we go. I'm going to assign him to the only pool that we've got. I'm going to do it by the user's email address. No telephony, and we're going to leave all the conferencing policies and everything like that on default. So there we go, enable. Off it goes, that user's now enabled. So what we can do now is jump across to a client machine and we can show that it's all working. So here we are with our Windows 10 machine. I'm logged in as that user we've just configured, which is Derek. So let's fire up Skype for Business, and what we should be able to see is we should be able to log in and use everything. There we go. I haven't activated Office on this trial machine, so I'm just going to kill that. So what you'll see, I'm straight in. I've already configured another user called Batman. It's on another machine here. Okay, so what we should be able to do now is actually test all the functionality. So if we wanted to, we can have a conversation. I'm also going to share my desktop with the other user as well, just to show that it works. We'll do that. There we go, and if we jump across to the other machine here, accept the meeting content, and what we should see is our screen share happening. There we go. So that's a basic standard edition Skype for Business setup. I haven't changed any of the policies or any of the other settings in there. It's just a very basic config, so you can now go off and do whatever you want with it and look into maybe the finer details of how it works. Anyway, I hope you found that useful.